Yo, what's up guys, Alpha, and today I'm going to be doing a new installment in the Under the Meta series, where I go over a deck I've been working on that I definitely think is strong and has a lot of potential, but isn't quite tier 1 for whatever reason. And in this episode I'm going to be going over my Boros Obosh Convoke deck in Historic. So the red-white Convoke deck has been tearing it up in Pioneer recently. It's just a very fast aggro deck that's been putting up some good results, so that kind of inspired me to try and port it over to Historic, look at some of the Historic exclusive cards that we have to see if we can improve the deck, and then just see how it ports over. So before I get into this build of the deck, which I definitely think is my favourite build I've tried so far, I want to show you my original build of the deck, which is a lot closer to the Pioneer build, just to explain how I got to that other build, if that makes sense. So if you're not familiar with this deck, it's basically a very go wide aggro deck. We have a bunch of 1 and 0 drops in the deck that swarm the battlefield really quickly and then enable us to use our Convoke payoffs like Knight Errant Enthusiast or Venerated Loxodon as early as turn 2 or 3, and then we've also got Regal Leosaur as another payoff effect that can just boost our whole board. So we'll start off by having a look at the Convoke payoff. So Venerated Loxodon basically provides a buff to our board in the early game. Now it does mean, because it's Convoke, that we have to tap down our creatures for a turn, which enables them to not attack, obviously, but the buff that we get on these, off this is really huge, specifically because we can very consistently get this out on turn 2 and 3. And then the Venerated Loxodon itself is really nice because it's a 4/4, which means it dodges Brotherhood's End, and it's a 5-drop, which means it dodges Fatal Push as well, so very difficult to kill with a lot of the commonly played removal in Historic. And we've also got Knight Errant Enthusiast, which doesn't provide a buff to the creature it convokes, but it does provide card advantage, which is really nice in this deck because, as you can see, we have a ton of 1-drops in the deck, so we're going to be, playing all of the stuff out of our hand. We're going to be empty our hand very quickly, so Knight Errant Enthusiast as a way to refuel is really nice. And the really nice thing about Knight Errant Enthusiast as well is that the way it works, even if we only use one creature to convoke this, say the opponent has been killing a lot of our creatures, we can still very consistently get 2 cards off this because so many of the creatures in the deck are 1 and 0 drops. So Knight Errant Enthusiast, really nice as a way to refuel. And then again, same as Venerated Loxodon, it's a 4/4 so it doesn't die to Brotherhood's End, and 5 drops so it doesn't die to Fatal Push. And then we've also got Regal Leosaur. So this card kind of exemplifies one of the biggest drawbacks of running this in Historic as opposed to Pioneer, and that's that we don't have access to Reckless Bushwhacker. So Reckless Bushwhacker is one of the most important cards in the Pioneer build of the deck. It's basically a 3-drop that you can surge in for 2 mana, and then when it does get surged, it gives all of your creatures haste and +1/+0. So Regal Leosaur is basically the best alternative that we have in Historic, and it does provide a slightly bigger buff. It provides a buff of +2/+1, which is a nice upgrade, but there are a number of issues with this card that make it kind of nowhere near as good as Bushwhacker in my opinion. So first of all, the fact that this is 3 mana as opposed to 2 mana is huge. We're a 20 land deck, which I think is the right amount, but that does mean that we're going to end up in situations where we get stuck at 2 mana as opposed to 3, and not being able to play your big board boosting effect because you get stuck on 2 mana. Having that board boosting effect be delayed is a huge drawback. If this was 2 mana and provided a +1/+0, I think it would be a lot better. Second issue with this is that it doesn't give your board haste. So one of the nice things that you can do with Bushwhacker is you can, for example, play a Gleeful Demolition to get 3 1/1s and then surge in the Bushwhacker to give those haste immediately, whereas the Regal Leosaur can't do that. But I think the single biggest issue with the Regal Leosaur is that if the opponent kills the creature you're trying to mutate on, you don't get the board boost, which is a huge drawback, especially when instant speed removal is everywhere right now. Fatal Push is everywhere, Leyline Binding is everywhere. That is a huge drawback. So I think while Regal Leosaur is the best alternative we have, it is kind of significantly worse than Bushwhacker, to the point where I'm not sure it's a really great replacement. Now, you might be asking, why don't you just run some non-creature replacements? So there's a card called Goblin Oriflame we have access to, which is basically a similar effect. Hold on, why is it not coming up? It's a similar effect to the Bushwhacker boost, but on an enchantment, which means it can't be interacted with as easily. Why is it not coming up? Hold on. Yeah, here we go. So it's a 2 mana enchantment, and it gives attacking creatures you control +1/+0, which is a similar effect. And you could also potentially look at, main decking something like Invasion of Gobakhan instead as well. But I think it's really important that this slot for the payoff is a creature, because otherwise your Knight Errant Enthusiast is way less impactful, right? Because, the issue with Knight Errant Enthusiast, if you are running 4 Goblin Oriflame, for example, is that unless you're convoking 5 creatures, the best you're going to get off the Knight Errant Enthusiast is just a bunch of 1 or 0 drops. And the fact that Knight Errant Enthusiast can find your Regal Leosaur or, your Reckless Bushwhacker in the Pioneer build makes it significantly better. So I really don't think you want to be running a non-creature payoff for this slot, or your Knight Errant Enthusiast just becomes way less impactful, right? Once you've got your board wide and you play the Knight Errant of Eos, you really want to be able to find this board boosting payoff. So that's the reason why I think Regal Leosaur is the best card that we have in this slot. But again, it's reasonable but not really good enough as a good replacement. But outside of that, we do have some nice upgrades at the 1 and 0 drop slot for Historic. But we're going to start off by having a look at the core of the deck that the Pioneer build also runs, and that is kind of built around Gleeful Demolition. So this is a 1-mana sorcery that can destroy an artifact, so can just destroy your opponent's artifacts for 1 mana, which is very good right now in Historic with the the affinity decks, the Lurrus aggro decks, and the Hammer Time decks popping around. But if you use this to destroy your own artifacts, you get 3 1/1 tokens. So 3 1/1s for 1 mana is obviously an insane rate, and we do have a number of enablers that are very good for this. So we have Voldaren Epicure, which produces a blood token we can target. We have Thraben Inspector that produces a clue token that we can target. We also have Ornithopter, so it's just a 0-mana creature that we can target with it. And additionally, we do have Esper Sentinel, but we're never really happy to be using Gleeful Demolition on an Esper Sentinel. If you have no other targets for it, then it's fine to do. But for the most part, you really want to be using your Gleeful Demolition either on the blood token, the clue token, or the Ornithopter. And getting 3 1/1s into play is incredibly powerful. It enables these ridiculous starts where you can go, Thraben Inspector on turn 1 into another 1-drop and Gleeful Demolition, and then you have 5 creatures in play, and you can immediately convoke a Loxodon or a Knight Errant of Eos on turn 2. So Gleeful Demolition definitely enables your fastest starts, and because we have Esper Sentinel in Historic, it does mean that we have 16 enablers for it, which is a decent amount. And like I said, you're never really happy using Demolition on an Esper Sentinel, but at least we have a high density of artifacts to be able to target with it, which is nice. So, like I said, Ornithopter, Thraben Inspector, and Epicure are predominantly here to enable the Gleeful Demolition, but in Historic, we do get some other nice upgrades that the Pioneer build doesn't have access to. First of all, we get Esper Sentinel, which I think is a huge upgrade to the deck. This card is so good against the vast majority of the metagame, particularly the decks that are very interactive. I think this deck's worst matchups are the interactive decks, obviously, because you're, a very goldfishy, swarm the battlefield style of deck, and Esper Sentinel being able to either delay your opponent's interaction or provide you card advantage is really huge. It obviously pairs incredibly well with the Venerated Loxodon because we can buff it very quickly, which makes it even harder for the opponent to pay the tax. So Sentinel, really great upgrade to the deck. Then we also get Artillery Enthusiast and Blazing Root Waller, which I think are really great upgrades to the deck as well. So Artillery Enthusiast, when it enters the battlefield, we can discard a card and seek a card of the same mana value. So first of all, we're pairing this with Blazing Root Waller as another way to get creatures into play for free. So one of the fastest turn 1s that we can have is Artillery Enthusiast, discarding the Blazing Root Waller to cheat it into play for free and get another 1-drop off the Artillery Enthusiast, the Seek off the Artillery Enthusiast, which is really nice. Blazing Root Waller also pairs really nicely with the blood token of Voldaren Epicure, so we can play the Epicure, loot away the blood token to cheat the Blazing Root Waller into play for 0 mana and draw a card as well. And Root Waller is just a nice aggressive card, right? We can attack with this, and if we have any spare mana, we can boost it, which, provides even more pressure to the opponent. So I think Root Waller off Enthusiast and Epicure is really nice as another way to cheat creatures into play for free. And then the other really nice thing about Artillery Enthusiast is that it gives modified creatures you control menace, which also pairs really nicely with the Loxodon, because if we have Enthusiast in play and we've convoked, 4 or 5 creatures for the Loxodon's ability, all of the creatures with +1/+1 counters on get menace, which makes it even more difficult for the opponent to profitably block you. So Artillery Enthusiast, really sick upgrade to the deck, and I'm a big fan of the Blazing Root Waller as well. And then we also get Giganthra as the companion, which is nice. Now, in a 20-land deck, the companion doesn't come up too often, but I think it's still, you are still going to have some games where you flood out, and having access to this is really nice. And in terms of the mana base, very close to the Pioneer builds that I've seen. You want as many pure red-white dual lands as you can, because the issue with pathways in this deck is, you want to be casting multiple spells in a turn. So if you end up casting one of your pathways on white, then that means you can't cast 2 red 1-drops in the same turn, which is a big issue, which is why we're running the Mana Confluence here, because it can, it basically just works as an additional red-white dual land. And we are such a fast aggressive deck that the life loss off this doesn't really matter too much. And then we've also got Castle Embereth here, which is really nice. Obviously we don't have that many actual mountains. We got 4 Sacred Foundry and 3 basic mountains. So this is going to enter tapped a reasonable amount of the time, but the curve of the deck could reasonably play 18 lands. So Castle Embereth is basically just an additional 2 lands that can also work as an additional boost effect, right? If we don't have the Regal Leosaur, we can just use this as an additional way to pump our whole board, which is really nice. So I'm a big fan of the Embereth. Kind of stole this from the Pioneer builds. This mana base is very close to the Pioneer mana base. And in terms of the sideboard, 2 Tormod's Crypt, I think is the best graveyard hate in this sort of deck because it's free. It doesn't interrupt your curve at all, so you can get the graveyard hate in play without affecting your curve at all. Now, you could consider running Remorseful Cleric in this slot instead, because that's a creature that works for your Convoke and can also be found off the Ranger Captain. Oh, hold on, I misspelled it. So this is potentially a consideration if you wanted, but I like Tormod's Crypt just because it's a lot quicker, can get into play without interrupting your curve. I think Portable Hold is really important right now because of decks like Wizards and Auras and, you know, Hammer Time and the Retrofitter Foundry decks. 2 copies of Giant Killer is really nice because it's a creature for Convoke, taps down your opponent's big creatures that can stonewall you, and also works as a removal spell against stuff like Shieldred and Atraxa and stuff like that. 4 copies of Invasion of Gobakan is also a card that I'm very high on in general. Very good against the control and slower decks that not only delaying their interaction, but if you can attack this down early and flip it into the Light Shield Array, it provides protection against cards like Brotherhood's End, which is really nice. And then a couple copies of Bifrost for the Artifact deck. So that's this build of the deck. I think this build is reasonably strong, but there are 2 main issues I've had with this deck. First of all, like I mentioned, I don't think Regal Leosaur is a good enough replacement for Reckless Bushwhacker, and having to run a card that is less powerful in a format that's faster like Historic doesn't really feel like a great exchange. But I think the biggest problem I have with this deck in Historic is that there are a number of decks that are legal in Historic and quite popular that are just really good at slowing down your early aggression that you don't have in Pioneer. You know, decks like Goblins, decks like Elves, decks like the Retrofitter Foundry decks like Auras are all really good at stopping you attacking in the early game, which makes this build of the deck and this strategy not as appealing. You know, in testing, you did have some hands that were just, you know, swarm the battlefield really quickly and attacked around it, but a lot of the time, especially going second against like a Retrofitter Foundry deck where they go Foundry into Ornithopter turn 1, and just have a 4/4 that prevents you from attacking until you get to turn 4 or 5, at which point the opponent probably has even more big creatures into play, means that this strategy felt like there were a lot of decks that were good at blocking you and then going over the top of you, so it didn't really feel that well positioned in Historic compared to how I imagine it plays in Pioneer. I've not tried it out in Pioneer yet, or I haven't really played Pioneer in a very long time, but that basically drew me to try Wickerwing Effigy. So this is an alchemy card, so obviously don't have access to it in Pioneer, and this is basically a 3-drop that allows us to play creatures off the top of our library. Now the creatures do get turned into 1/1 creatures with flying, but in our deck the majority of our creatures are already 1/1s anyway, so it's actually a buff playing them off the Wickerwing Effigy because it gives them flying as well. So the idea here is that we don't have a good enough replacement for Reckless Bushwhacker. Like I said, you can run some non-creature versions, non-creature cards, but you can't find them off Knight Errant of Eos, which makes the Knight Errant of Eos worse, which makes, you know, 2 of your payoff cards a lot worse, which I don't think is really great. So I really wanted to be running a creature in this slot, and Wickerwing Effigy seems like a really good card. Now, it doesn't provide a buff to your whole board, but it does enable you to go over the top of those decks that I was mentioning before, you know, like the Retrofitter Foundry decks, like the Auras decks potentially. So if you can get this out, it basically just enables you to go over the top of a lot of other decks that are good at stonewalling you, basically. So the idea here is that Wickerwing Effigy in a deck full, you know, with not many lands and a deck full of 1-drops, enables you to just get, you know, 4 or 5 cards off the top of your library every single turn. You know, if we have a board full of creatures, we can then cast the Convoke creatures off the top for free. Now, the Convoke creatures will become 1/1s as well, but it doesn't really matter. It's mainly the Convoke effect that we're interested on these. So, Wickerwing Effigy, while it doesn't provide as fast a clock as something like Reckless Bushwhacker, it kind of changes the dynamic in the matchups where you can just go over the top of a lot of the other creature decks. And, you know, similar to the Regal Leosaur, we can fairly consistently find it off the Knight Errant of Eos as well, which is a really big deal. So, the changes to this deck to enable the Wickerwing Effigy, first thing to note is that we're obviously not running the Gleeful Demolition package anymore, which does mean that we're slower on speed in general, but with Wickerwing Effigy, that's kind of the direction that we're moving in. You know, we're slightly less explosive, but there are some really nice upgrades for it. So first of all, the main reason that I'm not running Gleeful Demolition is because it's a whiff off Wickerwing Effigy. I think when you're running Effigy, you really want to be running all creatures if possible, so that you can very consistently not brick off this, if that makes sense. And the other nice thing about getting rid of the Gleeful Demolition package, while you do lose a bit of speed, you can increase the quality of your other threats quite a lot, right? You're never really thrilled to be running Ornithopter, you know, you're never really thrilled to be running Thraben Inspector either. And I also want to quickly mention as well, because I imagine I'll get some questions about it, why I wasn't running Retrofitter Foundry in my other build. And I just feel like Retrofitter Foundry doesn't really fit in with the deck's playstyle. You want to be swarming the battlefield as quickly as possible to get your Convoke creatures out. And whilst we are running Ornithopter, you know, so people might think, oh, we're running Ornithopter, you should run the Retrofitter Foundry. Foundry doesn't really play into the game plan at all, right? You can turn your Ornithopters into 4/4s, but if you don't have the Ornithopter, it doesn't really increase your speed in any way. So I just don't think Retrofit Foundry really works in the general game plan unless you're running more Thopters outside of Ornithopter, if that makes sense. Thought I'd quickly address that. But the other main changes to this deck, like I said, is that we can just run good quality 1-drops instead of having to run Ornithopters, instead of having to run Thraben Inspectors. So we have got a few of the same cards, right? We've got the Esper Sentinel here, we've got Artillery Enthusiast and Blazing Root Waller. I still like keeping Voldaren Epicurean as another enabler for the Blazing Root Waller, and also the Blood Token can be very useful, particularly if we've got Wickerwing Effigy out and we hit a land on top. We can use the Blood Token to clear the top of our deck and carry on comboing off with the Effigy, which is really nice. But the other 1-drops that we get to run in the deck are just good quality. So first of all, we've got Giant Killer, which I'm a really big fan of in this deck. So it's a 1-mana 1/2 that we can get down early to enable our convoke creatures, and it's cheap to play off the Effigy, and then we can tap down our opponent's creatures. So if the opponent is playing a big creature to stonewall us, like a 4/4 off Retrofit Foundry, like a Shieldred, like an Old Growth Troll or something, we can use the Giant Killer to tap it down to clear the way for us to attack, which is huge. But the other really nice thing about this is that it acts as a removal spell. So we can run a 1-drop that enables us to clear, kill stuff like Shieldred, kill stuff like Atraxa. Now, obviously, it can't kill, smaller creatures which are important to kill, like Crucius or, some of the Goblin Lords, for example. But the fact that Giant Killer acts as a convoke creature, so it doesn't slow down our proactive game plan and can be used to take out some of the biggest issues for this deck, is a really big deal. So I'm a huge fan of 4 Giant Killer. Gives us good outs to a lot of things. Then I've got 4 Soldier of the Pantheon as well. So I think this is probably the flex slot in the deck, but I'm really liking the Soldier of the Pantheon because I did feel like the domain matchup was quite tough, and Soldier of the Pantheon is really good at flipping that matchup on its head. You can use this to just stonewall stuff like Territorial Carvu, stuff like Crucius. You can also just attack through those creatures. One of the biggest ways that they normally stabilize against you is getting a Carvu down early, and getting Soldier of the Pantheon down enables you to just attack in. You also get some incidental life gain off this, and then there are other matchups where it's good. It's also decent against Rakdos midrange because it can, basically stonewall Blood Tithe Harvester, stonewall Crucius, and Croxer as well is another big one. So I really like Soldier of the Pantheon. It's just an aggressively slanted 1-drop that also happens to be really good against the domain deck, which is a tricky matchup. And then we've also got Tiefling Outcast, which I think is another just really good generically good 1-drop. So it's a 1-mana 1/1, and then when we attack with it, it double teams, so we get another one into our hand. So basically, if you can attack with this, it provides you with just another 1-drop for free, essentially. And those 1-drops then start boosting each other. If you draw this in multiples, it leads to some incredibly aggressive starts. So the thing I really like about cutting the Gleeful Demolition package is it just enables you to increase the overall card quality in the deck. And then the other huge advantage that we get of dropping Ornithopter is that we get to run Obosh as the companion. So typically, in these sorts of Convoke decks, I don't think the companion is too relevant, right? You're very rarely going to be getting up to 5 mana in like a Bushwhacker variant of the deck. But in this particular deck, when we've got Wickerwing Effigy, a lot of the time we are going to be playing a slightly longer game, playing off the top with Effigy when the board is stalled. And so having access to Obosh in those sorts of games is really nice because, like I said, one of the big issues I had with the Regal Leosaur build of the deck is that the opponent can fairly easily stonewall you with a lot of creatures. And in this particular build of the deck, we can just get an Effigy into play off the top, put Obosh into hand, and then cast it as like a big, way to break the board stall, essentially, make all your creatures deal double damage, and then it makes it really, really hard for the opponent to effectively block you. So I think getting access to Obosh is really huge here. Then the mana base is kind of the same in a lot of ways, but I've basically cut the mana confluence, mainly because we are relying on Effigy in a lot of situations. We want to be using our mana over the course of multiple turns, and I found when I had Confluence in the deck that I would just be burning myself out when I'm playing off the top with Effigy. So I wanted to cut the Confluence and just running a more simple mana base. Again, we have Obosh as a finisher, so I didn't feel like Castle Embereth was as important, if that makes sense. Still on 20 lands, that feels like the right amount to me. And then in the sideboard, so I've replaced the Tormod script with Soulguide Lanterns so that we can still enable Obosh, 3 copies of Bifrost for the artifact decks, 4 portable hull for the decks where we want more interaction, like wizards and auras and stuff like that. And then the other kind of like weird thing that I've got going on here is I've also got Gigantha in this sideboard because of Invasion of Gobekhan. So I found with Obosh that there weren't really good options on the odd, 1 mana or 3 mana options for the control matchup. I felt like Invasion of Gobekhan was by far and away the best card against Control, against Rakdos midrange, against Domain. So I really wanted to be running Invasion of Gobekhan, and because this is a very high synergy deck, I didn't really find myself sideboarding too much, or like you don't really want to be over sideboarding, or your proactive synergies start to fall apart a little bit, and that meant that I had a lot of room in the sideboard. So I decided to sideboard 2 companions. So in most matchups we can run with Obosh, but in matchups like Control, Domain, and Rakdos and Jund midrange, where we want to bring in the Invasion of Gobekhan, we can swap out the Obosh for Gigantha, because I felt like it was still important to have access to Gigantha, specifically against decks like Rakdos or Jund midrange, where resources are really important. And so because I felt like I had enough room in the sideboard, we are double companioning here, which is kind of cute. Not sure if I'm too lost in the sauce with this, and if you did want to find room in the sideboard for another card, Gigantha is definitely the card to cut. But overall, I think this deck is a lot better than the Leosaur build, because I think Effigy gives you a way to go over the top of a lot of other decks that are typically good at stonewalling you. I don't really feel like it's that good. If we had Reckless Bushwhacker, I think I would probably be more interested in the other build, because it is better at swimming the battlefield. But like I said, there are a number of matchups in Historic that are good at slowing down your early aggression, and Wickerwing Effigy just provides you with a way to go over the top of that, if that makes sense. So those are the builds of the deck. Definitely let me know in the comments if you've got any suggestions for the deck, if you've got any questions about it at all, if you've been working on this deck, what text you've been running in it and stuff like that. Next I've got some gameplay so you guys can see it in action. I've got some matches from the constructed event. I've only got a couple here because they were quite long and I don't want the video to drag on for too long, but like I said, let me know in the comments if you've got any questions at all, and I hope you enjoy the gameplay. Big up. Okay, so we're on the play here, and no top end payoff, but I think, you very rarely want to mulligan with this deck because resources matter so much, and 2 Esper Sentinels on the draw is going to be good against a ton of different decks. Lurrus, the majority of Lurrus decks outside of the Humans deck are going to get hurt by Esper Sentinel, right? Auras really doesn't like playing through it, neither do the Artifact aggro deck, so I think I'm going to keep this, and then even if we don't draw anything, we already have 4 lands. So even if we do keep drawing lands, we can potentially just get to Obosh as well. So, the fact that we have Obosh as an actually really impactful companion. Okay, we drew Loxodon anyway, but the fact that, Obosh is a meaningful, power boost to our board as opposed to Gigantha, which is kind of just a free creature, does mean that getting to 5 mana is actually beneficial in a lot of situations. So flooding out is a lot less of an issue here. Okay, Third Path Iconoclast is a bit of an issue because they can start swinging the battlefield to, stonewall some of our blockers, but we do have a very fast start here. We get to get the Root Waller in play and then convoke everything. If they are running an Iconoclast deck, I assume they're running a lot of non-creatures, which is going to be really hard for them to play through with 2 Esper Sentinels with 2 power, right? It's going to be almost impossible for them to pay the tax. So even though Iconoclast is probably good against us, this board state is very good against Iconoclast. So they do kill one of the Sentinels, but we get 1 card draw off it at least, I imagine. Yeah, they do pay the tax on one of them, which makes sense. Okay, sick. We hit an Effigy as well, which is, definitely a way we can go over the top of an Iconoclast. This is the sort of situation where if we were running the Leosaur build, I mean, Leosaur would be good in this situation, but I could definitely see a situation where if they get the Iconoclast down early, then the Leosaur build is just going to get stonewalled quite easily. Whereas here we can just freely attack with everything, and then, we can just play off the top with the Effigy, get a bunch of creatures into play for free. So yeah, we obviously had a very good start here. Wow, they don't even chump block with the 1/1, interesting. But yeah, I think we should just be good to win this one. Unless they have a board sweeper, we should be decent. And the really nice thing about Loxodon is it dodges Brotherhood's End. And, unless they're running Languish, I don't think that's going to be good enough. Okay, so they push this Sentinel, and they do pay the tax. Okay. I mean, that's kind of brave. I feel like if I was in that position, you probably just have to give the opponent the card. Unless, okay, they obviously have another piece of interaction here, or they wouldn't have shocked in the Watery Grave. But we get to play off the top a little bit more with the Effigy. We get the Tiefling Outcasts here. And Esper Sentinel, which is really nice. So this kind of exemplifies that if the opponent had got off to a faster start and did stonewall us, Effigy is just a really great way that we can just go over the top. Oh wow, okay, we hit Enthusiast, so that allows us to play the Root Waller for free essentially, which is really strong. So it looks like the opponent's probably forced to play their interaction now, which gives us more information. Yeah, okay, so they push the Soldier of the Pantheon and get another 1/1 in play. But we get the Sentinel, we get the Enthusiast here, which then enables us to get this Root Waller into play and tutor up another 1-drop, which is nice. And the Enthusiast gives the Root Waller Menace because it has a +1/+1 counter on it as well. Okay, yeah, opponent just scoops it up. So that obviously felt sick. So sideboarding here, I'm not really sure exactly what the opponent's on, to be honest. I mean, since we saw the Iconoclast, I think I'm going to bring in Portable Hold because that is potentially good against us. And Soldier of the Pantheon is usually the cut if the opponent isn't playing multicolored spells, but since we did see the Iconoclast, so I think I'm going to cut the Tiefling Outcast. That might be wrong though. Maybe it's better to cut the Soldier of the Pantheon instead. Not 100% sure, but typically the cut is if Esper Sentinel isn't good, if it's like a very creature heavy matchup, then we can board that out. If the opponent isn't running multicolored spells, then we cut Soldier of the Pantheon. And if they are running both non-creature spells and multicolored spells, then I usually cut Tiefling Outcast instead, because all of the other 1-drops are quite integral to. I guess Giant Killer is another potential cut as well, actually. If the opponent is not playing a particularly creature heavy deck, you can consider cutting Giant Killer as well. But I never really cutting the Enthusiast or the Voldaren Epicure or the Blazing Root Waller, because those cards provide a lot of speed to the deck. So I think we have to keep this right. Like I said, you never really want to mulligan with this deck because resources are very important. And then I'm going to lead on the Soldier of the Pantheon here, just so we can, get off to a slightly more aggressive start. Then turn 2, we could potentially go Epicure, or we could potentially go Enthusiast, actually. I usually like going for Enthusiast first, just to see if we can hit something better. Now, we do need to think about what we can potentially hit here, because Enthusiast pitching a 1-drop can find Portable Hole, which does slow down our aggressive start. But since we are, we don't have a ton of fuel here, I'm going to pitch the Loxodon just because I would quite like to cash it in for a Knight Errant if possible, just to give us a way to refuel. Now, to be honest, having Enthusiast does give our creatures Menace when we convoke the Loxodon, so maybe Loxodon is slightly better here. But like I said, we play creature out here, we convoke, and then we're kind of out of gas a little bit. So I liked going for the Knight Errant here because it potentially allows us to find a Wickerwing Effigy off the top, which would have been nice, but Loxodon is still reasonable here. Now, the opponent could obviously have a counterspell here. Okay, consider, so they're probably digging for a counterspell, and that also probably tells me that they're running 2-mana counterspells, or they wouldn't consider at this point, right? They would probably wait to consider if they didn't have 2-mana counters, so I'm going to use that as a read that they're running something like Make Disappear. Otherwise, I don't think they would consider now. They would probably wait for it to resolve first. Okay, so they gust the Enthusiast, probably so we don't get Menace on our creatures. I think I'm going to bottom that. Like I said, we're kind of out of gas. I really want to try and draw into an Effigy or a Knight Errant Effigy or another Loxodon potentially. Either way, even if we do keep flooding out, we've still got Obosh here, which, like I said, is really nice to have access to, because if you're not flooding out, you normally have enough gas to keep going, and if you are, Obosh just gives you a really nice power boost. Oh, okay, Root Wall is nice. So I think I'm going to attack here, then put Obosh into hand, and then we can loot the Root Waller into play at instant speed. So even if the opponent has a sweeper, we can, dodge that with the Root Waller. Okay, so opponent does have Snapcaster Mage, so kind of regretting bringing in Portable Hole now, because I never really want to use Portable Hole on a Snapcaster Mage because it's so vulnerable to like an Abrade or something like that. So if this does go to a game 3, I might be more interested in Invasion of Gobekhan. To be honest, maybe I should have thought about that, because if they're running third path Iconoclast, they're probably running a lot of interaction. So maybe Invasion of Gobekhan would have been better anyway. I was mainly thinking I wanted Portable Hole specifically to deal with the third path, but if they are running counter spells, which I imagine they are, I think I would have been better off going for Invasion of Gobekhan instead. So if it does go to a game 3, I'm definitely going to change how I sideboard here. Okay, so opponent just passes back. We're definitely going to loot the Root Waller into play here. And then if we can draw our 5th land, we can potentially just slam the Obosh. Now again, they could have counter spells, but if they spend their turn going for that, then we still get to attack in for quite a lot of damage. So we get the Root Waller into play, and we get to draw here. Oh, okay, sick. We draw an Effigy. Interesting. Okay, so we draw a Knight Errant Effigy as well. So I think I'm going to run out the Effigy here, and if that resolves, we can then go for Knight Errant Effigy as well. If it doesn't, we can just attack and boost the Blazing Root Waller, which is pretty nice. So I guess we'll find out if the opponent does have counter spells. I suspect they do, because of the consider that they went for earlier. So they could have like a Make Disappear here potentially. I wouldn't be surprised if they're running that. They could potentially be running Archmage's Charm as well, because from the mana we've seen, they do have predominantly blue lands. Yeah, okay, they do have Archmage's Charm, so that does mean that we don't get the Knight Errant Effigy out, but that's not a huge deal. We have a lot of power in play, so we can just, attack, boost the Root Waller here, and that represents a lot of damage, right? We deal 9 damage here, puts them down to 3, and then we've still got the Obosh, we've still got the Knight Errant of Eos, so opponent's definitely on the back foot here for sure. Now again, they could have sweepers, I imagine, but yeah, the Loxodon survives Brotherhood's End though, so that's a pretty big deal. Oh, and they have Drown in the Loch as well. Okay, now we're in a rough spot because we can't cast Obosh. Okay, now we can. So that was a huge draw. I mean, to be honest, even if we drew... Actually, no, if we'd drawn a creature, that would have been pretty bad because we wouldn't have even been able to convoke the Knight Errant. So that land drop was pretty important there, I think. They don't put Lurrus into hand. So they must have some piece of removal here, right? Either way, definitely going to Portable Hole. And that will force them to use their removal if they want to get a token. So they might have another Drown in the Loch or something like that. And if they do, then... Oh, okay. That's pretty sick. So they Kolaghan's Command, get a 1/1, and get the Snapcaster Mage. So I think what we want to do here now is probably Enthusiast into Knight Errant of Eos, and then, you know, we're representing a big amount of damage next turn, and we get 2 creatures off it. So unfortunately, we did see the Effigy in there. If we had another creature, we would have got an Effigy, which would have been pretty sick at this board state, but they have got Snapcaster Mage. Okay, they're going for Snapcaster Mage now, which is interesting. So what are they going to pick here? Potentially Drown in the Loch or Archmage's Charm, maybe? No, okay, they Drown in the Loch, so they're probably going to kill the Obosh here, I'd imagine. And they do get another token off the Iconoclast, so I really wish I could have got that Effigy off the Knight Errant of Eos, because I think Iconoclast is going to be slightly tough to race now. So opponent has managed to turn it around. The Kolaghan's Command was a huge top deck for them, I think. So I'm going to definitely want to use the white mana in case we draw. You know, it's generally best to have access to both red and white here. So we're in a pretty awkward spot here. I think I'm going to attack him with both. Thankfully, they don't have the Lurrus into hand. If they can get Lurrus into hand and stabilize, that's going to be really tough to beat because they can just keep looping the Snapcaster Mage. So we have now cleared their board. We can run out the Giant Killer. So just got to hope if the opponent blanks for 1 turn, I mean, they can still go put Lurrus into hand and cast it here, which is still pretty good. I mean, I'm going to set stop during the opponent's turn just to represent that we have something here, but wow, they do Aether Spellbomb as well. So we can obviously tap down the Lurrus and attack here, but that only puts them down to 1. So we're 1 damage away, which is really annoying. And now they are going to be able to start looping Snapcaster Mage and Iconoclast. So this is kind of rough. I'm going to hold on to the Sacred Foundry just to represent interaction. I don't think there's any way we can really get punished for that. Plus, if we draw Epicure, we can potentially loot it away to find something else. So I think it's definitely worth holding on to the Sacred Foundry here. But yeah, this is pretty annoying. I mean, them looping Spellbomb every single turn is also going to be pretty hard to beat. So this was super close. We were 1 damage short. And yeah, I think that Kolaghan's Command was just the difference maker. But yeah, I mean, opponent can go Iconoclast, bounce something. They can go Snapcaster Mage, use Kolaghan's Command to get back the Iconoclast and kill the Epicure or something like that. So they do go for the Snapcaster Mage. And the annoying thing now is, like, we really can't afford to attack. Okay, they go Archmage Charm. But yeah, if we attack and they just chump block with the Snapcaster Mage, they can just keep playing Snapcaster Mage each turn. Okay, if they whiff off the draw 2 here, we can potentially, you know, get enough damage into him. But again, they can just bounce our Loxodon and attack with the Lurrus here to buff their life total if they drew on interaction. Yeah, so they bounce the Loxodon. I assume they attack. Yeah, so that puts them up to 5. And now even if we can kill their Snapcaster Mage, we don't have enough damage on board to kill them. So, yeah, opponents managed to turn this around. Okay, they have Fatal Push for the Giant Killer, so we can't even tap down their Lurrus next turn. Okay, we did draw another Giant Killer, so I mean, I think the best we can do here is just Giant Killer and then convoke the Loxodon again, but I don't think we're winning the long game here. Had we managed to get that Wickerwing Effigy off the Knight Errant of Eos, or had they not countered the Wickerwing Effigy earlier, I think we would be winning this fairly easily, because I think we can beat a third path with an Effigy in play. I mean, I guess they have you know, stuff in the graveyard that they could flash back off the Snapcaster Mage to kill the Effigy, right? They could have used Kolaghan's Command to destroy it off the artifact mode, but yeah, I think opponent's probably stabilized here. I don't know, unless we draw an Effigy off the top. If we can draw an Effigy off the top, then we've got a way to win here, but Yeah, it's frustrating that we were 1 damage short. Okay, Esper Sentinel's probably not going to help. Going to run it out anyway. But I imagine, like, at worst, the opponent can just start looping the spell bomb here, either to bounce a creature every turn or just draw them an extra card. So, yeah, opponent's done well to stabilize here. So, yeah, don't really have good attacks because we definitely don't want them to be able to loop the Snapcaster Mage here. Gonna set a stop anyway, just to represent interaction. Yeah, okay. So they use Kolaghan's Command, we discard the Sacred Foundry, and they kill the Esper Sentinel. So yeah, I very much doubt we're going to win this one now, but it was super close. Had we got in for 1 point of damage somewhere else, we would have won a few turns ago. But yeah, like I said, I think, you know, having access to Effigy is really nice because it allows you to beat board states like this. Gonna go for the Knight Errant here. Yeah, okay. If it gets countered, we just lose now, right? I mean, we're not dead on board, but we basically are, right? Even if we draw an Effigy now, they have too big a board. They're gonna put us down to... okay, they make another token. So yeah, I mean, the opponent is packed full of removal. This could be a slightly tricky matchup if they do get a foothold in the game, but thankfully we have both Effigy that can go over the top, and we have access to very fast starts as well, so... Yeah, okay. So that was a good recovery from the opponent for sure. Well, that was very close. Like I said, we were 1 damage short, and I definitely want to change our sideboard here, right? I don't think Portable Hold is good now we've seen Snapcaster Mage, and since we've seen both counter spells and... Wait, what? What is going on? Wait, my companions have disappeared. What? And it says I'm at 58 cards as well. Hello? What? So we definitely want the Invasion of Gobakans, but... Oh, it looks like it's put the companions in my main deck, and there's no way... Oh, wait. I just noticed they're on the right. Oh, I'm an idiot. Whoops. I completely missed that they were just on the right there. I thought they'd just, like, disappeared into the companion zone. Okay, that was my bad. Whoops. So, unfortunately, we have Gigantha and Obosh in the main deck now. Okay, that was... I really hope we don't draw them. I mean, thankfully, we wanted to mull anyway, and we can put Gigantha to the bottom here, but... Yeah, that was me struggling a lot with the UI. And again, I mean, this hand is pretty weird, right? But I think turn 1 Sentinel, we have a very high density of 1-drops. Okay, second Sentinel off the top. So, yeah, that was just a disaster in sideboarding there. I don't know what happened. So, obviously, really want to find the third land here. But if the opponent has any early interaction, we get to draw cards here, which is huge. We don't draw the third land, but we do draw an Enthusiast. So... I think, even though Loxodon is very nice with the +1/+1 counters, I mean, there's definitely an argument to pitching a Loxodon to try and find another Knight Errant, but considering we have Gigantha and Obosh in the deck, I don't think it's worth it, because cashing in a Loxodon and finding like a Gigantha is awful here, so I definitely don't want to do that. So they do push the Sentinel, so if we don't find another land here, we could potentially be in trouble and just get stuck with a bunch of Convoke creatures in our hand. Okay, sick. We've found the land, which is huge. So I think we want to go for the Loxodon here, just because it makes it harder for the opponent to play around the Sentinel tax, and it gives our creatures menace off the Convoke. But yeah, I mean, I don't know, just annoyed about the sideboarding thing there. Okay, they go for the barrage on the Loxodon and have to tap out to pay for the Sentinel tax. So again here, I think we just go for Loxodon again over the Knight Errant. Okay, we draw another Knight Errant, but yeah, I think we want to go Loxodon again. Just keep making it progressively harder for the opponent to pay the Sentinel tax. You know, if we can keep them on 1 spell a turn, we can definitely just beat them on tempo, hopefully. So we'll see what the opponent does here. Okay, they Kolaghan's Command killing the Sentinel, but we do get to draw a card, so that kind of mitigates the other mode they picked. So definitely go for Knight Errant. It's a bit annoying that we can't convoke 3 creatures, because it means we can't hit Effigy here, unfortunately. And we do find Effigy off the 6 cards as well, so... A little bit annoying, but we still get to, you know, find 2 cards. We've still got a lot of power in play as well. And we can potentially, you know, convoke for 5 next turn if we wanted to. And yeah, opponent hasn't committed to the board at all. Okay, they main phase is Snapcaster Mage, probably to get another Barrage, I imagine. Yeah, so probably take... Well, it doesn't really matter which card they take out here, right? Okay, they go for the Knight Errant. But they're still pretty far behind on board here. Okay, sick. We find an Effigy. That's huge. So I think I'm going to go for the Soldier into Giant Killer into Convoke here, and then save the Effigy for later. I think I'm only going to Convoke the 3 creatures and attack with the Loxodon here, because there's no real difference between convoking 3 and 4 creatures, because we're not running any 4-drops. So now we can start attacking with the Loxodon, and now we've got a big board, right? I presume since they're in Grixis colours, and we saw Brotherhood's End, that they're not running Languish, I assume. Right, but they're probably running Brotherhood's End, which means that even if they find it, they're only going to be able to kill the Soldier of the Pantheon and the Giant Killer. They're not going to be able to kill the Loxodon, the Knight-Errant Enthusiast, or even the Enthusiast now, because it's a 3/4. So I feel pretty good about our spot, right? The Sentinels really bought us a lot of time in the early game. Okay, interesting. So I think we'll play the Iganjo, and we could tap down the Snapcaster Mage, which means they can't trade with the Soldier of the Pantheon, which seems pretty good, right? It means we can just force through, a ton of damage here. And then again, since they're in Grixis colours, and unless they do have Languish, I don't think they're going to have great ways to stabilise here. Okay, they do have Drown and Lock, which does kill the Knight-Errant, but we're still getting in for a lot of damage here. And then just going to go for Soldier of the Pantheon into the Root Waller, and then we can hold the Effigy to just recover next turn if they do have a massive sweeper. Right, if they did the same thing they did last game, where they go like, Brotherhood's End into a way to kill the Loxodon, having the Effigy as a way to refuel seems pretty good here. And I would rather apply more pressure just in case they have a lot of single target removal, right? The risk going Effigy instead of Soldier plus Root Waller is if they have single target removal for the Loxodon, single target removal for the Enthusiast, we suddenly don't have enough pressure in play to go for lethal anymore. Yeah, okay, opponent just scoops it up. Sweet, we got that. Even with Gigantha and Obosh in the main deck. Okay, so we're going first here. And yeah, I think we can keep this. A little bit annoying that we have, the Sokenzan here. This kind of, exemplifies why I think you really want to be running as many pure red-white dual lands as possible, because, if we don't draw a second white source, that's going to limit our ability to empty our hand, which is why I'm a big fan of Mana Confluence in the other build, but the annoying thing is I don't think you can really run Confluence in this build because of Wickerwing Effigy. If you do end up needing to play the long game, taking 1 damage each time off the Confluence is pretty annoying. Now, I think you could run maybe 1 Confluence and it'll be alright, but oh wow, opponent's on Devotion by the looks of things. And thankfully we're on the draw. Thankfully they also had to mulligan quite a lot, so we've just got to hope they don't have a crazy fast start. Okay, we did draw the second white source, which is huge. Definitely going to attack in here, would happily take the trade when they have a Leyline of Abundance. But yeah, I think Confluence is good if you're on the all-in aggro build, but it's kind of a liability with Wickerwing Effigy, which is a little bit annoying. But yeah, just got to hope the opponent doesn't have anything crazy here. Okay, they do have a Kiora. Do they have a second land as well? Oh, wow. And they have Nykthos, so they can untap the Elvish Mystic and play a 4-drop this turn as well. So if they have a Karn or an Old Growth Troll or something, that could be pretty scary here. Wow, they do have an Old Growth Troll. That's a pretty good start from a Multi 5 I think they're on. But, Devotion typically mulligans quite well. So thankfully we can go Giant Killer into Loxodon here, which isn't bad. Gets a lot of power into play quite quickly. Just got to hope the opponent doesn't have a crazy follow-up to this, because they did mull quite a lot. So you just got to hope that they didn't draw too well off the top. But yeah, we'll see what they got here. So they have 7 mana off the Nykthos, plus, they're doubling up the mana off the Elvish Mystic as well here. So they got 8 mana. They could go land Karn into Sky Sovereign would be pretty scary. They could also, I think the worst here for us would be Storm the Festival. So, but if their Multi 5 was Leyline, Elf, Kiora, Nykthos, Old Growth Troll, and Storm the Festival, don't think there's too much we can do about that. Okay, second Leyline's not too bad. That does mean that the Nykthos now taps for 9 mana. Hopefully they just pump their mana into the Leyline and don't have another big follow-up. Looks like they're considering untapping the Nykthos. They probably should if they're considering activating the Leyline here. Okay, one of their other cards is a land, so Just gotta hope that the last card in their hand isn't crazy here, because we do have a lot of power in play, and the nice thing about the Giant Killer here is we can just tap down the Old Growth Troll as well if that's their only blocker. Okay, so they got 10 mana here. Okay, sweet. They're just pumping it into the ley line. That's a relief. Okay, so we draw a 1-drop as well. So we could potentially put Obosh in hand and go Epicure. We could spend 2 mana tapping down the Old Growth Troll. But when we're at 4 lands, I think I'm kind of tempted to just not worry about tapping down the Old Growth Troll and just get Obosh into hand. Now, this isn't going to guarantee kill the Kiora, right? But if we attack like this, I think they're pretty incentivized to block the Loxodon, which means we don't need to worry as much about attacking the Kiora with multiple things. And now we can go Epicure, put the Obosh into hand, and even if we do draw another land, we can just go Obosh and then attack in for a huge amount the following turn. So even though we could have potentially tapped down the Giant Killer to guarantee killing the Nykthos there, I think the way we attacked, they're pretty incentivized to block the Loxodon anyway, because they don't have that much on the board. And now we've just got to hope they don't draw well off the top, which is, you know, always the case against Devotion. You know, they don't always have it. I don't want to tempt fate. Okay, there's another ley line. I mean, that is something, but... okay, and Kiora as well, so they're going to obviously now untap the Nykthos. But then they have to tap the Elvish Mystic to activate Nykthos again, which would mean that Old Growth Troll is their only blocker. Wow, they don't do that. Interesting. Okay, we draw a Knight Errant off the top, which is interesting. I think I'm just going to tap everything down here and go for the Knight Errant and just go for a big turn the following turn. And doing this, okay, sick. We hit Wickerwing Effigy and... Loxodon isn't bad either, because now we can go... Well, we can either go Effigy or Loxodon. Okay, there's a land on top. I was going to say, if we knew we were going to get a land, I think going for Loxodon there is better, and then we can basically guarantee lethal off Obosh next turn. The risk with going Loxodon there is if we don't draw a land off the top... Actually, I don't know. It's close. Maybe Loxodon is just better either way, but I was thinking if we don't have a land on top, Effigy is better because we can just start playing off the top, getting a bunch of flies into play. But maybe we have enough pressure where Loxodon is enough to start closing the game out. I don't know. I mean, I don't hate Effigy there, honestly, because, you know, getting flies into play is going to be tough for them to deal with unless they draw Cavalier off the top. Wow, okay, looks like the opponent doesn't have anything. I mean, if they don't have anything that great, we can still probably just gem Obosh next turn, even without the Loxodon in play here. I mean, would we have won anyway if we had gone for Loxodon? So Knight Errant would be a 5/5. Loxodon, no, not quite lethal, I don't think. 3, 5, 7, 9, no. Okay, I mean, I think we still have lethal with Obosh here, though, right? Because Obosh will just double up the damage on everything. So they block Knight Errant and Soldier, and then that'll be 4, 12. Yeah, so that should be lethal then. So we just jam the Obosh here, attack them with everything, and... So yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with the Wickerwing play instead of Loxodon, because... I mean, I guess if they'd drawn another creature, it probably wouldn't have been lethal with Obosh, but... Yeah, so we got them down to -1, so that felt pretty good. Obviously, opponent did mull, but that's going to happen with Devotion quite a lot. So we definitely want Portable Hole in here. Getting rid of their turn 1 elf is going to be really important. And then Soldier of the Pantheon, they don't play any multicolored spells, so I don't think there's really much utility. So that's definitely the cut here. And then we just run it back. I mean, obviously, looks like the opponent's not sideboarded here either, which is, you know, it's always nice to sideboard quickly against Devotion to see whether they did bring anything in against you. Okay, this looks pretty good. I think I'm happy to keep this. Again, I would really like this Plains to be a dual land, though. You know, I really would like to be running Confluence if I can, but I don't think it's really that viable here. So I think I'm going to lead on the Outcasts here, just in case, you know, if they have a draw where they don't have an Old Growth Troll on turn 3. On turn 2, I mean. So they do have the Old Growth Troll, which is a little bit annoying. I mean, I'm just going to go Epicure and then loot the Root Waller into play, and then we can either go for Loxodon or Knight Errant next turn. Okay, opponent does have Khan. Very important to activate this blood token now before the Khan stops us doing so. And now it's pretty nice because next turn we can just go Outcasts, make the Outcasts in play a 2/1, and then we can attack Khan with everything and guarantee kill it. Obviously the opponent didn't know we were going to get the Root Waller into play, which is probably why they thought it was safe to go for Khan, but we can now guaranteed kill Khan next turn, which is huge. And then... don't have enough in play to be able to convoke something, but I think getting Khan off the board is the most important thing here. Be interesting to see what they get off the -2 here. Probably either Sky Sovereign or Essica's Chariot, if I had to guess. Sky Sovereign, I mean... Oh, wow, they go for Platinum Angel. Interesting. So we're definitely going to attack the Khan down here. Oh, no, wait. Oh, my God. Okay, that was a huge misplay on my part. I've completely forgot to play the Outcasts before combat, and now they can just block the Root Waller and keep Khan alive. Okay, that was a disaster. Yeah, I'm probably going to misplay quite a lot because I'm really tired today. But yeah, that was really bad. So now Khan survives, and now that's really annoying because we've got a lot of power in play. We're going to have to direct that towards Khan next turn when it should have just been dead here. That was, yeah, a big misplay on my part. Whoops. Now they got Mystic as another blocker, so that means we're going to have to expend even more resources trying to kill the Khan here. Okay, so we did draw a Giant Killer that we could use to kill the Old Growth Troll potentially. I mean... I think I'm just going to attack Khan with everything here. And then... Because the issue with killing Old Growth Troll is that they get more mana going into next turn, and I would really like to save this Giant Killer for the Platinum Angel, or we don't really have an out to that, if that makes sense. Which is the most important thing when they've just fetched it. I mean, thankfully we got to kill the Khan here, right? I kind of thought that would happen because they're unlikely to want to block with the Elvish Mystics when they're trying to get to Platinum Angel, but had we not misplayed the turn before, we could have just gone face with all of these attacks and potentially, you know, put them down to, what would it be, like 12? So yeah, that misplay last turn means we've missed probably 6 points worth of damage here. So they run out of the Platinum Angel. I mean, I'd be very happy for them to attack. I guess they'd think that we probably don't have a main deck way to kill it, or like we have very few, but we already have the Giant Killer in hand, so very happy to see that. And Portable Hole's not a bad draw here either, because we can then also kill their Elvish Mystic to deny them a bit of mana. So definitely just going to apply as much pressure as possible. Again, it's pretty annoying because if we hadn't misplayed earlier, they'd potentially be down at 1 already, which would basically guarantee a kill next turn. So really hoping that doesn't end up mattering. We'll see. Oh, yikes. They got Storm the Festival. Fingers crossed they don't have a crazy hit here. I mean, they don't have Nykthos, thankfully, so I don't think, you know, but I think their best hit here would just be 2 creatures. You know, maybe like 2 Cavalier of Thorns would be their best hit. Okay, there's 1 Cavalier of Thorns, and they hit a Kiora. Okay, thankfully no Nykthos, but they do get to draw a card. And yeah, I mean, this would... Wow, and Pelukrinos. Okay, yeah, this would be like a guaranteed win had we not misplayed earlier. Kind of frustrating. I mean, thankfully we still have the Convoke creatures here, so... And we can go for both the Knight Errant and the Loxodon here. So I think we're going to Knight Errant Convoking 3. Okay, nice. And then we can Convoke the Loxodon as well. So definitely going to run out the Outcasts. And then with the Enthusiast, I don't know, I don't mind pitching the Loxodon to try and find a Knight Errant here just to get a bit more fuel. Actually, no, wait. Okay. I nearly misplayed again. Well, I did misplay, but thankfully I wasn't punished. Yeah, sorry, I'm not thinking clearly today. But now, because of the Artillery Enthusiast, all of these creatures with +1/+1 counters on get Menace on them. So I definitely shouldn't have risked discarding with the Enthusiast there. I definitely should have just played the Loxodon. I mean, thankfully we found another Loxodon. We didn't get punished for the misplay, but now since, you know, the Outcasts are all Menace, it's basically impossible for them to have good blocks unless they can find a way to kill the Enthusiast here. So Enthusiast winning us the game here. I mean, yeah, 2 really stupid misplays on my part, but looks like we won't get punished. I don't think Mono Green's going to have a way to kill Enthusiast unless they've brought in like Sky Sovereign into the main deck. But even then, we can tap down the Cavalier with the Giant Killer and still have reasonable attacks. So yeah, even though I made 2 pretty stupid misplays, thankfully it looks like we should be getting there here. I mean, it's a good sign the opponent's in the tank, obviously, as well. But yeah, Enthusiast with Loxodon is such a powerful combination. Like, giving your creatures all menace just makes it so much more difficult for the opponent to block. I mean, that's one of the biggest issues with the more aggressive builds with Leosaur, that a lot of decks can build up a big board presence very early on, which makes it very difficult to attack. Wow, they just Legend Rule the Polukranos to draw a card. Do they not have enough mana to activate the Polukranos, turn it into like a Wormcoil engine sort of thing? I mean, I guess we could tap it down with Giant Killer either way. But yeah, sweet, we got there, nice. Even with the misplays. So not as much gameplay as usual, but I wanted to have extra time at the end of the video just to talk about this deck, because I definitely think it's a very potentially powerful deck, but I think there's a lot of different issues with the deck, and I wanted to quickly address how you could potentially fix those going forwards, and why I'm not really sure there's a good build so far. Again, I could be missing something, so definitely let me know in the comments if you can come up with any solutions to what I'm about to talk about. So I think in general, the best way to build this deck is very aggressively, like this particular build that we've got here. I think the biggest issue is just this slot with Regal Leosaur. I think if Reckless Bushwhacker was legal in Historic, this would be the best way to build it, but I just don't think we have a good enough replacement for that card. Like I said, Leosaur is the best alternative that we have, but it's just not good enough. It being 3 mana instead of 2, and you're getting blown out by instant speed removal is a real issue. So if Bushwhacker was legal, then I definitely think this build would probably be the way I would build it. Like I said, I don't think you can really afford to be running non-creature versions. There's obviously stuff like Pride of Conquerors and Goblin Oriflame that are decent in this shell, but that I think if you run that, then Knight Errant of Eos becomes worse, like I said earlier, and I really think you need to be able to hit this payoff slot off the Knight Errant. So while we don't have Reckless Bushwhacker, and there's no good alternative creature in the format as far as I'm aware. If there is, and I've just missed something, please let me know in the comments, because I'd love to fill this slot and make this build of the deck viable. The issue with this particular build of the deck is that you need to be so fast to be able to beat decks like the Retrofit Foundry decks and Auras and Goblins, because otherwise they're just capable of committing to the board quickly and just shutting down your ability to attack them, which is a big issue. So I think for what we have available in Historic, the Wickerwing Effigy version has tested the best for me. This does give you a way to beat those board stalls, particularly against those Retrofit Foundry decks, or decks that aren't like going way over the top of you. Like a deck like Goblins that has Muxus, you can struggle to beat for sure, but against a lot of the other decks that just commit to the battlefield, like, Humans and Merfolk and Retrofit Foundry decks, Wickerwing Effigy just gives you a really sick way to go over the top. It allows you to play the long game. But the issue with Wickerwing Effigy is that you really struggle against decks that do go way over the top, right? The combo style decks, stuff like Muxus, stuff like Kethis. Also the decks like Domain as well can be tricky. Now, you do have some fast starts. I think Soldier of the Pantheon is a meaningful upgrade to the deck that does help you against Domain, but the weakness of Effigy is it kind of pulls the deck in two different directions, where you're a very fast deck that wants to be committing to the battlefield and attacking. You can have some crazy fast starts, specifically off Loxodon as well. And Effigy does kind of halt your aggressive game plan and says, okay, we're going to stop committing pressure and start going for more value. So it does pull the deck in two different directions, which does then make the deck worse against the more all-in combo decks. Now again, we do have Invasion of Gobekhan in the sideboard, which does help, but it is a bit, it's not completely linear in what it's doing, right? It does pull the deck in two different directions a little bit, but I think it is the best option that we have. Like I said, from playing the deck, I think this slot really needs to be a creature to hit off Knight Errant of Eos, and I just don't think we have a good alternative. So if we do get Reckless Bushwhacker in a future anthology or something like that, then I think the way I would personally be most interested in building the deck is the other build, just replacing Leosaur with the Bushwhacker. And then I think the issues against the Retrofit Foundry decks and the Auras and Goblins decks, where they can commit to the board and start blocking, kind of get mitigated, because like I said, the difference between 2 and 3 mana at being able to boost your board is huge. The ability to go like Gleeful Demolition into Bushwhacker, boost your whole board. The ability to find the Bushwhacker off the Knight Errant of Eos and then surge it into play with only 2 mana is really, really big. So I think this slot is the main thing that's holding it back. So if you have any suggestions for how you know, specifically for a card that could fill this slot. Like I said, I think it does need to be a creature for Knight Errant, but if we can find a way to fill this slot with a really good creature that can enable you to go all in aggressive, then I think that is a really good way to build it. As things stand, until I find a better replacement, I do think that this is the better build of the two. But like I said, you do run into some issues against the combo decks. You are a little bit less fast against them, which is the normal way that you would pressure it. So that's the main issue I'm having with the deck. Just this slot, I think Wickerwing Effigy is the best I've tried, but I don't think we have a good enough replacement to go all in super aggressive as a deck that's trying to go underneath everything, if that makes sense. Either way, definitely let me know in the comments if you've been building your version of the deck. I've seen a ton of different versions that people have been trying, putting it to historic, so definitely let me know, you know, how you've been building it, what sort of text you've been running, and yeah, like I said, definitely let me know if you can come up with a solution to this slot. Either way, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you on the next one. Big up.